commercial driver license, captain's license, talking, driving, boating.
I used to pick her up to drop me and talk to her on Volkswagen Rabbit, you know.
Nice.
I don't know why you would want to drive everything.
Yeah. Sure, yeah. Yep.
Blinded by the light. I'm going to stand over here. Thank you, everyone, for coming inside on this beautiful day. But we're going to take a fun trip on a Boston duck boat. And our speaker today, Johnny Kinsman, has been here a number of times. But he actually works for the Boston Duck Boat Company. He trains and coaches the drivers and helps bring the Boston story to life. So he's going to give us his insider view of the company and the history of the company and share a lot of fun information along the way. So please join me in a warm welcome for Johnny Kinsman.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Wellesley, for having me back. I always love speaking here. And this time, I'm speaking about what I'm doing when I'm not standing here, which is a nice treat because I always feel like a little bit of a double agent when I'm standing here as a normal person when my heart is floating around on the Charles River in a wild costume. So my name is Johnny Kinsman, and, well, I'll start this way. This coming week, Boston Duck Tours is hosting a dinner party for their employees that are celebrating significant milestones within the company, 5 years, 10 years. This milestone for me is 15 years, which is remarkable because I had no intention of working for Boston Duck Tours at all. No one is more surprised than I am that I've been there for 15 years. But you will see as I talk about the company itself and about my journey, you know, there, you'll understand how we've arrived at today and why that's a great thing. So, going back 16 years ago, that's what I used to look like, and that's my lovely wife. This is the day of our wedding. Back in 2009, my wife and I decided that we were quite enjoying our life in Los Angeles. I was working in film crews, and I was acting in the movie industry, TV shows, films. My wife had an equally glamorous job. She was organizing red carpet affairs for celebrities and then getting those stories into the press. And that was like a wonderful dream, but it didn't feel like real life at all. And so we decided, you know what, let's quit our jobs and sell our cars and break our lease and move back home and everything's going to work out. Well, yes and no. As you see, we're happy there. We've been happy ever since, but the beginning of our life back in our hometown of Boston was not smooth. We found ourselves with more expenses than income, and we were both underemployed. And I was, you know, waiting. This was around the time, I don't know if you remember, when there was all that talk about a movie studio opening at Fort Devens, and how the you know, East Coast entertainment hub was going to be right here in Massachusetts. And so I had reason to believe that all of my prior experience doing that stuff in California was going to be able to transfer me right into the show business industry and happily ever after. Well, it coincided, that our move coincided with the realization that that was a fantasy. It was never happening. Nobody was, you know, being a shyster. There just was never any money for it. The whole thing collapsed, and suddenly my wife and I, who had, you know, the year prior just gone to Hawaii on a whim because we both had no responsibilities and plenty of dough, were standing in the aisle of a grocery store trying to figure out if we could afford the brand name pasta or if we had to stick with the store brand pasta, and I burst into tears. We were in Porter Square, and my wife was holding my shoulders going, "What's the matter with you?" And I said, "What have we done to our lives? What did we do? We were so well off and happy." Well, anyway, I told my mom that story, you know, and our parents were there to help us and, you know, a shoulder to cry on, but they couldn't support their 2 adult children who made this wild move. So my mom runs into a guy that was a longtime mutual acquaintance of ours from the theater scene in Concord Players, the community theater. And this guy's name is Joe, and he just happened to ask, "Hey, how's your son doing?" And my mother, instead of doing the normal conversational, "Oh, he's great, how are you?" She goes, "Not good, Joe. Not good. He is broke and very sad." And so So he says something to the effect of, well, I work for this really weird company, but I think he'd be great. If he's interested, tell him to call me. So I call this guy. Hey, how you doing? Not good, Joe. Not good. Anyway, one thing leads to another, and it comes to my attention that Boston Duck Tours is having auditions, which is coincidental because they only do it once a year, even still to this day. And so it happened that I had a few days to prepare an audition, and so I go to the heart of Fields Corner neighborhood in Dorchester, and this is where the audition is. This is the Duck Garage. And this is just such a small sampling of, we have, almost 30 vehicles now, and this garage is cavernous. It's the size of an airplane hangar, and they're all ducks in a row, no pun intended. And they had pulled one out so that the auditioners had somewhere to stand and, dance for their job. And it was the middle of December, it was freezing in there, and it was like a Lord of the Flies situation. I just remember looking around, and there were all these existing Duck Tours employees with notebooks and scorecards, and they were deciding whether or not we were going to make the cut. Anyway, we made the cut. I made the cut. And so once you go through a good audition there. Now, I'm going to simulate with you, just for fun, a little bit of what we do now for the auditions, because I run the auditions. So if you do well in this room, you're hired for the spring. So what we do is we do a little warm-up games, and we do tongue twisters. So everybody do this with me. And say, red leather, yellow leather.
Red, yellow, yellow leather.
Red leather, yellow leather.
Red leather, yellow leather.
And then say, mana nama, mana nama, mana nama, mana nama. And butta getta, butta getta, butta getta, butta getta. Can you imagine this being a job interview? That this is why we're so strange. Anyway, so you get the idea. We do theater games, and then what I have them do now, I say, I'd like to hear a family-friendly joke. And if you're wondering what that is, it's the kind of joke you can tell without doing this first. So we have a joke from them, and then we say, I want to hear a mini duck tour. 5 minutes tops, about a subject you know well. So assuming that they don't know anything about Boston history, you don't have to have a knowledge of the city to get the job. We just want to hear how you present yourself. So if it's talking about the first car you ever owned, the first pet you ever had, tell us in a descriptive way about this thing, and we like to see, just how people present. And we also want to know what their quack call is going to be, because if you've ever, how many people have been on a duck tour, by the way? Oh, good, most of you, excellent. Did they make you quack? No? Well, that's going to change in this room. So part of the thing with the duck tours is that we ask our guests to quack, and we give them a quack signal. So for the purposes of this talk, whenever I say, here's Kilroy, you yell, quack, quack. Let's do that. Here's Kilroy. Quack. Perfect. Natural. Anyway, so we want to know what their quack call is going to be, and every one of our narrators has a different quack call because they are all portraying different characters, and I will get to that later on in the talk. So the audition goes well, and then you have a job interview. And this is security footage of that day back in 2010 when I got this job. Pretty accurate. Basically, we find out, is this a person that we want to work with? You can have a great audition and then come in and have a terrible attitude. So we say, do we like this person? And then we tell them a little bit about the company and say, do you like us? Now that you know a little bit, do you want to work here? And so what does it mean to work there? Well, in order to make this duck operate, you need a commercial driver's license. You need a Coast Guard license. It doesn't have to be anything very special. You're not driving a tanker, but it has to be you're a certified U.S. Coast Guard captain. You have to be able to pass a U.S. Coast Guard physical. And sometimes, depending on the doctor, you have to crawl through a hatch to show that you can. Same with the commercial driving physical. You have to be able to pass one of those. You have to know the history of Boston eventually. We teach it to you. And you need a Hackney license and a Jitney license. And both of those are nuanced in different ways, but ultimately it means you're picking up people, but you're not kidnapping them. You are a professional, and you will release them back into nature after the tour. So before we get too far into like what it's like to work at duck tours, let's back up into history a little bit. What is a duck? This, of course, is a schematic of the old vehicles from the 1940s. And duck, we say duck boat a lot of the time. Well, it's been foisted upon us. We were trying to hold the line and say ducks because that's what the Army called them. Well, everybody says duck boat, and so we said, all right, fine, it's duck boat. But those letters mean something, D-U-K-W. The D stands for 1942. It's GM's manufacturing code. So the letter D is the fourth letter of the alphabet, and 42 was the fourth year of the war. And so that's how it lined up. So had it been they designed in 1941, it would have been a C-U-K-W. Anyway. Fourth year of the war, fourth year of the alphabet. The letter U stands for utility vehicle. Just like today with SUV, sport utility vehicle. This is a utility vehicle. And the duck's special utility, of course, is that it was amphibious. Still is today. The K is a weird one. K, anyone heard of a K car? Front wheel drive? That's the K. That's where it comes from. If you picture the letter K, you see it here. There's an arrow pointing forward. That's what GM was using to denote front wheel drive in their vehicles, the K car. And so GM gave this the same name. And W looks like the twin rear axles at the back of the truck. So it's pretty plain when you break it down. D-U-K-W, put it together, the soldiers called them ducks. Here it is all together. Now, when GM was manufacturing just a few of these test ones, they were trying to sell this thing to the Army, to the armed forces. And the generals were not thrilled. They would go, "What if this thing doesn't have any armor? What do you mean?" And they go, "Well, no, it has to float. It's going to be very light. And it's kind of slow." Yes, but it doesn't stand still. It actually does go. And so one of the slogans they came up with was better in the water than any truck and faster on the land than any boat. And they're going, ah! And still the brass is going, I don't know, this doesn't seem worth it. There's a world war on. We don't have time for antics. So this thing was all but dead in the water, pun intended. And then something crazy happened. Shortly after midnight, on the morning of December 2nd, 1942, a Coast Guard auxiliary boat, it was a yawl about 50 feet long, was out near P-Town in Massachusetts they were looking for U-boats, German U-boats. And the winds were blowing 40 to 60 miles an hour and a hard rain was stirring up these high waves, and the crew of the vessel starts calling into the Boston Coast Guard station saying, "We've run aground on a sandbar. All of us are fine, but we are stuck and things aren't looking great." And the Coast Guard says to them, "Well, that's terrible because the conditions are such, we can't really send any other boats out there. There's 7 of you on that boat, but what are we going to start risking crews?" And they couldn't send a helicopter, and they didn't know what to do. And it just so happened that these guys with these prototype ducks were right there in P-Town, and they said, "Would you mind if we gave it a shot?" And so they went, "All right, well, if you think you can get there, go ahead." And so what these guys did is they got into this D-U-K-W and they decided to go out into this horrible sea. And it's going up and down, and they finally get there, and these ducks have had the ability to adjust their own tire pressure depending on the surface they were about to land on. So if you were going over a coral reef, you would adjust it to the coral setting, so you'd have some purchase without it breaking all apart. Sand, you want it real low. You get inland on a road, you pump it up like a tire on a regular truck. And so these guys dialed their wheels down. They drove up onto the sandbar. They got all 7 guys off. They drove to the land, and the people driving the duck called the rescue unremarkable because it was so easy for this duck to do what no other boat or aircraft could do in that moment that they got these back to shore. And then they said, "All right, you're safe." And they went, "Oh, we should have set an anchor." So the duck crew goes, "All right, we'll go back out and set an anchor." So again, they go back out, they get on the boat, they set the anchor, they come back to the land, yawn, no big deal. The next day when they decided to try to recover that boat, no trace of it. Gone. So had that duck not saved those 7 guys, they probably would have perished in that event. So needless to say, that greenlit the whole thing. Once the brass saw what that thing could do, they said, all right, let's make them. And so 21,000 D.U.K.Ws were produced for the war effort. And there was a crazy thing. I went to the Ford Museum one time in Detroit, outside of Detroit, and there was a book in there called The Arsenal of Democracy. And it was one of these coffee table books of old photographs of production lines and vehicles and all of that. And the takeaway from it is that GM was making ducks, but they were allowed to test them at the Ford Rouge facility because they had the river right there. I think it was Ford was making Jeeps, and they were able to test them at the Pontiac plant because they had this terrain where you could test, you know, the grit of the vehicle. And so all of the major car corporations were working together in the interest of the country. Sure would be nice if that was still such an easy thing to accomplish. So anyway, with all the able-bodied men off fighting in the war, who built the ducks? Women. Rosie the Riveter built the ducks. Over 21,000, almost 22,000 D.U.K.Ws, plus the planes, the tanks, you name it. Scrap drives. It was a heroic effort that this country produced. But I will say, since it was just, you know, up for public discussion in the most recent election cycle, the reason that all of these women were able to enter the workforce suddenly and all of the men were able to go off fighting in the war is because of this thing called the Lanham Act. The newly created War Public Works and War Public Services, the largest role both in funds and number of projects was providing daycare for the children of women who took jobs in the factories or worked in government offices to help the war effort. And without this service, many of the 6 million women participated in the war effort. They could not have done that if they had to stay at home with no access to child care. So the federal government granted $52 million for child care under this act, which is equal to more than $1 billion today. So the country saw the need, they funded it. Boom! Suddenly, you have all these people who can and will help the effort. And so, here is the duck. This is actually in the wartime theater. This is just, you know, nothing special about this specific one, but you can see we've gone from a concept drawing to a production line to the parking lot, and now we're in, you know, action. And it was very hard prior to the duck arriving for the U.S. to get their supplies to the land. We were entering a war that had been going on for a few years now, and so all the ports were either controlled by the enemies or they were destroyed, filled with landmines, you know. So you couldn't land in a port. You had to go elsewhere, drive up onto the land that way. Wounded soldiers, they could take them from inland, drive them. They couldn't build a hospital in hostile territory on the land, but you could have a hospital ship a few miles offshore, and so you get all these wounded soldiers, you get them in there, you drive them out into the water to the hospital ship, let them recuperate. These ducks were, to call them valuable is the biggest understatement ever. You can see, look how many soldiers are just casually riding on that duck, and you can see the tires are going through the sand, no problem. You can lower these things from a boat. They were light enough that you would pull the ship into the approximate area you wanted to land, lower the ducks down into the water on cranes, and then use those same cranes to lower cargo onto the ducks and then drive it right up onto the land. If you put 2 ducks together with some rigging, you could put a P-38 airplane on both of them, drive them together up onto the land to an airstrip. If you put 4 tanks, four ducks together in that manner to bear the weight, you could put a tank on them. And before the tanks themselves were amphibious, that's how we got those tanks from the ships to the shore to begin their action. So these ducks were instrumental in, you know, all of the landing actions, both in Europe and in the Pacific. Yes?
Very curious about the engines in these. Were they highly reliable? Obviously, they're pretty strong.
They're okay. So that's a good question. The duck, It was a team of guys. Some of them were from MIT, some of them were not, but they were all genius guys, and they were tasked with design this vehicle fast. And the design that the concept they designed only took less than a month for them to come up with. But what is underneath all of that hull is known as a deuce and a half. It's already an army truck. I think it was 4-cylinder, ran on normal gasoline. So it was like powerful, but nothing specially made for the Duck vehicle. It was strong enough to haul cargo on the land and strong enough to turn that propeller.
Was that frame the deuce and a half frame?
Yep. Yep, and there are many. If you start going down the rabbit hole on the internet, you can see, the frame, and then the guys welding all around it, or the prototype were made by men, but then once they were in production, the women were making them. But they just would weld the hull around them, and there's a specialized thing. So the propeller is actually attached to the drivetrain. And I don't know cars very well, but all you got to know is this propeller is like another gear. So if you're in first, second, third, fourth, the gearing is operating smoothly and normally, and then you flick one switch, and suddenly instead of all these tires rolling, it's the propeller spinning. But if you've got a hole in your hull that leads all the way to the engine, to the drive shaft, you need a specialized rubber boot to keep that watertight. And so these were some of the innovations that they came up with to make these vehicles. So even though they were, so useful and nobody saw them coming, in terms of an innovation, once they figured out what to do, it was easy to do it. They just, all right, take that deuce and a half and make it float. Sir?
What is the siding made out of? It wasn't the same as the original Duck.
Today we have aluminum siding because it's even lighter, but these were made of steel. And it wasn't very thick, but this thick. You can knock on it, it sounds hollow, Now in the meantime, here's another thing of a bygone era. This whole Kilroy was here. Have you guys heard the phrase Kilroy was here? Kilroy was here was military graffiti that appeared all over the European War Theater, all over the Pacific War Theater, and it became a badge of honor. Who could write it in the weirdest place? There were stories of the Allies, going into a town in Belgium that had already been passed through, several times, and the whole place was smoldering, but the people were liberated and the good guys were there, and they would climb up to the top of a bell tower, and inside the bell you'd see Kilroy was here. There was not one place where you didn't look in Europe or all over the world and see this phrase Kilroy was here. So how in the world did this start? Well, during World War II, Technical Sergeant James J. Kilroy worked at the Four River Shipyard in Boston, Massachusetts. And back then, the ships were riveted together. And so, the workers were paid by the rivet. If you put a lot of rivets in, you get more money than if you work slowly. And so there were rivet counters. Kilroy was one of them. So Kilroy was part of a team. He'd have a notebook and he'd count a line of rivets, make a line, count the rivets, make a line, count the lines, turned it into the bursar. The worker goes to the bursar at the end of the day, gets their paycheck. Well, if you were kind of a shyster, dishonest riveter, after Kilroy would leave with the chalk line, you would kind of rub it off and then make another chalk line, or using antics with the chalk in order to, you guys okay? Using antics to get paid more than once for the same line of rivets because chalk is so easy to rub off and draw different things with. So Kilroy figures this out, and instead of using chalk, he switches to a heavy grease crayon that's not so easy, and if you start messing with it, it smudges everywhere. And he would make a huge line and actually write the phrase Kilroy was here. Well, our effort to get into the war was so frantic, we didn't have time to paint the insides of the ships. We barely were painting the outsides of the ships. And so these ships made at the Four River Shipyard included the aircraft carrier Lexington, the heavy cruiser Baltimore, and the battleship Massachusetts. Thousands of kids going into the Army were going all the way across the sea, not knowing what was going to happen to them, but everywhere they looked, in the weirdest of places, they would see Kilroy was here, Kilroy was here, Kilroy was here. And it became known as understood as an omnipresence of this Kilroy. Who is Kilroy? I think we're Kilroy. I think we're going there. We should tell people Kilroy was here. And so somehow along the way, this little doodle of a guy got connected with Kilroy, and so this guy became Kilroy, and he would appear anywhere the soldiers had been, proving that they had taken that ground safely and were protecting, our new European allies against the threat that they were facing. So, 1990s. This guy on your right is Andy Wilson. Andy Wilson was a local. He worked, I think, in finance in Boston, and he was doing all right. He had money, he had a boat, nice life, but he was disenchanted. He's like, I'm not making a difference. I feel a calling. I don't know what it is, but I know this ain't it. And so Andy Wilson goes on a road trip. He gives 2 weeks notice. He's got a little nest egg, so he goes on a road trip, and he's in a motel, and he's rumbled awake, I think in Tennessee, by the sound. And he looks out the motel window, and there is an amphibious D.U.K.W. going down the street giving a tour of this little town, wherever he was. And he went, that's amazing. And he starts putting two and two together, because I said he had a boat. He would take people from the Charlestown Navy Yard all the time up through the locks into the river to show them the back bay. And every single time somebody saw the back bay from right where the Longfellow Bridge is, they would go, oh my God, this is the most beautiful city in the world. I can't believe it. And so he put one thing with the other, and he had a bright idea. And he said, Boston needs duck tours. So he comes up with a logo. And here, you can see, Kilroy was here. Well, this guy's a duck. The little man has turned into a duck with webbed wings, feathers instead of fingers. And here is the cartoon version of it. And if you know the military at all, that is a sergeant's insignia. So Sergeant Kilroy lives on in this duck form. And here you can see the two of them for comparison, although I'm pretty sure the point was driven home already. So we're open for business. And this was no small feat. I'll just sidebar 1 second. In order to get Massachusetts politicians to agree to let you take a World War II gasoline vehicle into the Charles River, he needed buy-in from the city of Boston, the city of Cambridge, because our tour route goes in both, the EPA, the DCR, it was the regulatory committees, and were just astronomical. But he kept persevering and persevering, and we began as a 4-duck 15 employee business on October 4th in 94. Here is one of the first tickets. And I mean, it doesn't look like much. It didn't look like much in person either. It was like a bookmark. Here you go. Good luck. Now, oh my God, if you've ever gone on our website lately and tried to book a tour, it's like booking an airplane flight. I mean, so we have 3 departure locations, so many ducks. Anyway, 4 ducks we had, the original ducks. Beacon Hilda, Charlie River, Waterfront Wanda, and Beantown Betty. And all of these ducks were named by school children, and they still are today. Whenever we christen a new one, we poll local Boston public school kids, and they come up with the name of the new duck. Incidentally, Beantown Betty, this is black and white, but it's a maroon duck. And it was an original from the war, so it took a lot to keep it running. Finally, as times went on, they said, all right, we've got other options. Let's retire Beantown Betty. Beantown Betty is now at Polar Park in Worcester, in center field, next to the Wormtown beer tent, and children can climb all over it. And I went there with my kids, and I recognized Beantown Betty, and I said, you guys, Daddy used to drive this duck. And they were like, oh, that's great, Dad. Who cares? Anyway, there we are on the land, there we are in the water. So what is it we're doing in these vehicles? Well, we're giving a tour of Boston. So I mentioned we originally only had 1 stop, and that was near the Prue. Today we have 3 different, we call them duck stops. And so we've got the Prudential Center, we've got the Museum of Science, which is way over there with the dinosaur, top of the screen, and also the New England Aquarium with the fish over here. So this is a pretty crazy thing, because we have 3 stops. We depart now every half hour on the busy season. So there is a 9 o'clock tour rotation, they call it, right? So 3 ducks depart the Peru at 9 o'clock. 3 ducks depart the Museum of Science. 3 ducks depart the New England Aquarium, all at 9 o'clock. So you have 9 ducks entering traffic at once. Then the same thing happens again at 9:30. Then the same thing happens again at 10. Then it happens again at 10:30. And so eventually it's supposed to be roughly an 90-minute tour. So the 9 o'clock ducks arrive back at their original spot at 10:30. They take a little break. They go out again at 11. And then at 1. And then at 3. And then at 5. So we have, on our busiest days, 28 ducks doing 5 tours each a day. For 80 minutes at a time. And we go all around the different sites, and we all go into the river. And here you can see it's just a collage of the things we talk about. These are in Copley Square. This is the cod, the sacred cod that hangs in the chambers of the State House. We've got Bunker Hill Monument, King's Chapel, USS Constitution, Longfellow Bridge, the Tea Kettle, and somewhere along the way, depending on traffic and timing, you also have to shoehorn in exactly what happened at the Boston Massacre. You know, if you've got nothing but green lights and you're next to the old State House, you still have to get that story out because you don't have another place in the city to tell it. There's other stuff to talk about. So we have to talk about Paul Revere's ride. We have to talk about what the Battle of Bunker Hill was and what happened and how and why. Plus, we have to talk about the physical attributes of the monument itself. It's almost 300 steps to the top. There's a museum. This is the year it was built. Blah, 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 blah. Boston Tea Party. Our tour route doesn't really go over there often, but people want to know, where is the Boston Tea Party? So you got to choose the right dead zone in a neighborhood or the long red light. If there's somebody parallel parking in front of you and blocking traffic, you go, oh, thank goodness. Because you get a chance to catch up with what people expect of you. And to that point, we are in a weird position as a company because, you know, we've got this cartoon duck logo. We give away stickers to kids. We do school groups and camp groups. We do bachelor parties and bachelorette parties. But also, we've got people who come to us to hear the history. We've got teachers bringing their classes on field trips and they want an austere history presentation. But we sell duck whistles. We call them duck lips. And kids are expected to blow these things the whole time. So we find ourselves in the position of having, 35 people who fit on a duck. You might have 35 different expectations of what this tour is about to be. You've got parents who brought their little kid and they're just worried the whole time. Is this kid going to have fun? Is he going to get fussy? Do I have to take them off? They've got the kid being like, I've got a whistle! Are they going to sit through the Battle of Bunker Hill story? So people come to the tour with all different expectations and we have to meet them all. So it is a very tough job to be a narrator for duck tours. Now, you saw the original 4, you heard the names. We have, like I say, 28 ducks, all of them ridiculous names. Old Gloria, Tub of the Hub, North End Norma, Back Bay Bertha, Miss Emma Science, which doesn't make sense until you say it fast, Miss Emma Science, South End Sarah, Kenmore Carla. I'll stop now, but this is one of my favorite names, Red Sox Nathan. So, and also, Kilroy is a fuzzy character that you can see walking around in the street sometimes too. He's not just the cartoon logo on the ducks. He's this tall, and some poor kid has to get in there and march around sometimes and wave. It's the best. So I got into this a little bit, but in order to make this happen, everybody sees the narrators, they're called conductors, and they see the drivers. But what they don't see is all of the support staff that has to make this happen. We have an office staff with marketing, ticketing, all of that stuff. But on the ground, we've got an operations manager that oversees the whole thing. We've got dispatchers, one at every duck stop, that communicate not only with every duck that they're responsible for that day, but also with the other duck stops. If there's a traffic situation, we will radio to each other. The dispatchers will tell people. If the river has too swift a current to go in, we have what's called an all call, where the operations manager will get on every single radio at once and say, this is an all call, the Charles River river is closed, no ducks in the river until further notice, you know. So, and then we have sales rep, GSRs we call them, guest service representatives. And these are the poor kids who sell the duck lips and make sure everybody's in the right bench and make sure everybody's happy, and they do little spray tattoos for the kids. And, you know, it takes a village to make a duck tour happen. Now, I was talking about the conductors. We have in the neighborhood of 50 of them now, all with different characters, all with different silly names, and these are the angles that we take with them. You know, this guy is Harvey Heartbreak, the marathon runner. In real life, he's a marathon runner. These are his real medals from running, but he plays a marathon runner character named Harvey Heartbreak. Up here we have Bill Drakesbeer, who has a lot of Shakespearean puns. Over here we've got Florence Waters, better known as Flo. We've got Ziggy Starduck. Her whole shtick is that she's an alien from outer space. Her spaceship is broken, and she's, you know, killing time around the local community, learning the ways of these Earthlings. We've got this guy, Hot Wheels. He's obsessed with tiny things. And his favorite toy as a kid was a little Matchbox car, a Hot Wheels D.U.K.W. And imagine his surprise when a real one drove by and he climbed on and lived happily ever after. We've got Paprika Double Q. Her backstory is that what is it? She was part of the original girl group called Salt and Peppa and Paprika, but then they found out that she was too spicy, and so now she gives tours. So we have all these crazy, silly characters, and so it adds a layer of whimsy, but also a layer of complication onto the job that's already hard. Because, you know, if Harvey Heartbreak is talking about how many steps are in the Bunker Hill Monument, he's going to say that in the context of, well, as I was training for the marathon, what I did was I would climb these because there are X steps. If Ziggy Starduck is talking about it, she'll say, well, you know, as I was landing my spaceship, I could see this obelisk in Charlestown, and that's what I decided to land next to. So it's like, it's the lens through which you present the information of the city. The facts are always the same. It's just how do you spice it to fit the character you are portraying. Now, we've got this one guy named Duck Tracy, and I love his tour. He does a lot of meh, she, you know, and he's like, meh, I want to know, how did this Back Bay neighborhood appear here when it all used to be water? A mystery! So that's his shtick, and he's the nicest guy in the world. And one day, so his name is, you know, duck name is Duck Tracy. His real name is Kevin. And he was scheduled to work one day with a guy named Mike Rosario. We call him Big Mike. And so Kevin and Big Mike arrive at the garage in Dorchester, and they're doing their normal morning stuff. Kevin's getting dressed in his detective suit, and meanwhile, Big Mike is doing the safety check. Now, this is a very old one. This piece of paper that I photographed is from 2013. But now all of these points are accounted for in an electronic system, and more than just these now. And they do the same circle check of the vehicle. And what I mean is you walk around the thing in a circle, making sure all the lights are operating, making sure there's no dents, dings. Is the sign attached right? Or is it going to catch a biker on the way by? Then you go under the thing. You look at the brake lines. You look at the tires. Is the tread correct? Is it not? Is it too worn? Are the tires flat or not? Is the propeller, in proper orientation? Is that waterproof boot still waterproof? Are the rudders in the right spot? You do this whole thing. And the reason I'm bringing all this up is because of this section. Check prop and hull for damage, lettering logo. We have tie and anchor ropes, boat hook, ring buoy over driver. How many life jackets do we have? The first aid kit. So we're doing not only a commercial driving circle check, but we're also doing a U.S. Coast Guard circle check on a vessel. And the reason this comes into play is because several times a year we get drilled on the safety aspects. What happens if there's a fire? And this is not only in the company, but also the U.S. Coast Guard shows up a few times a year with their clipboards and their uniforms, and they say, they'll get us out into the river, and they'll go, what happens? There's a fire on the dock, what do you do? And so you have to say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, this, this. You verbally tell them everything that's going on. Okay, tell me what you're going to do if it sinks. So there are protocols you can take to make it sink slower. But luckily for Boston, in the Charles River, there are shallow spots all over the place, and we've got tires. So if we hear a high water alarm going off, or we see the bilge start spitting out water, we just drive to the land and let it sink, because it's only 2 feet of water in many, many spots, and we know those spots. Medical emergency. What happens if someone keels over? We all know CPR. We all know basic first aid. Long enough to get an ambulance there. Towing drills. Sometimes ducks break down in the water. That's why I laughed when you said, oh, the engine's reliable. Nah, yeah, sure. You know, by and large, yes, as reliable as anything else. But if you break down in the water and you're floating, we've got tow ropes on the front and back of every vessel. You just radio to the duck you see. You go, hey, can you tow me to land? And it's the most fun thing in the world. You go, oh my goodness, you guys, we get to tow that red duck with this pink duck. Watch this. And so you do all the things with the shackle and the boat hook and so not only does the Coast Guard expect us to do that for them, but we do it for ourselves in the company, and we have a logbook of who was trained last on what when. So Kevin and Mike finished their circle check, and they had clocked in early that day because before they began their tours, they had to go do their Coast Guard drills in the river. So there they are, Duck Tracy and Big Mike, doing their man overboard drills, throwing the life ring. I drive to the life ring, you pull the thing, we ask him if he's okay. All right. And on the land, people are waving at them frantically. And we're like celebrities, so we're like, yeah, hello, you know, okay. But then they realize, no, this is not just waving. This is, they are signaling to us, and they're screaming at us. And so Big Mike looks in the water, and what he sees, a baby who could walk, but that's about it, had squeezed through some of the balusters of Memorial Drive, that side of the Charles River, and had fallen. Like, this is near like Cambridge Side Galleria. There's railing all the way, but this little kid found one spot where his head, boop, could fit right through, and he fell in. And the father dove in after him. But as you see, there's nowhere to climb out, and he couldn't swim with the kid, and it's freezing cold water, and they're frantic, and they don't know what to do, and the guy is trapped there. So Big Mike has to get this 21,000-pound D.U.K.W over to this stone wall without crushing these two. Meanwhile, Kevin is the certified deckhand, and so he's preparing the boat hook, and he's getting the fender bumpers in case they bump into the wall and they don't damage the hull, and he's getting the Mylar blanket ready to put on the kid, and he takes his shoes off because he realizes he's going to get wet, and he's got a whole work day. So he's walking around frantically in his stocking feet as Mike is angling this vessel over to them. Here's a close-up, and what they end up doing is they drop the ladder that the guests would get on the sidewalk, and Big Mike gets this duck just close enough so that Kevin can walk down into the water up to his knees and take this baby from this dad, bring it back onto the duck, and right away he puts the Mylar blanket on because the kid is shivering. They get the dad up there, they give him a blanket, and they pull up the ladder, and they go only about 100 feet or so, but the parent couldn't do it, to a dock where the fire department was waiting. They were there, but they were waiting for the duck to do the rescue. Just like P-Town, no other vessel was just right for this thing. And so they give the baby and the dad to the custody of the fire department. Everybody is fine in this story. It all works out well. But the thing, I'm sure you can hear it in my voice, the thing that kills me, that chokes me up about this whole thing is, you know, these guys, it's such a flurry of activity, and they get the kid to the EMT, and they're pulling away from the dock, and all of a sudden, Big Mike is looking at the steering wheel and where he's driving, and all of a sudden, we have these security cameras on every duck to see, you know, what happens and if there's an incident or whatever, and the security footage shows Kevin in his detective costume burst into tears because the emotion. Finally, he was able to relax, and it just washed over him. And to see the humanity in this kid, just his shoulders, you know, hefting. And Big Mike, father of two girls, looks at this kid and just puts his arm on his shoulder and keeps driving the duck, and he's going, "You did good, kid, you did good." And the two of them, these buddies, drive off to start their day of work. And so Kevin gets a new pair of socks, and they are out there doing 5 tours, and they keep getting interrupted all day by news crews who want to hear all about this rescue. And so once word hits the streets, the Coast Guard gets involved, and they give these guys certificates of merit, and there's a big ceremony, and these two are local heroes. Look at the smile on Kev. Oh, God, I love him. Anyway, and then, because we can't have nice things, all the people in the duck garage start making fun of these two heroes. And they made this, like an action movie poster called Departures. The Departures is just the advertisement on the duck roof, but now it's a sepia tone action movie. But they did get properly thanked at the Celtics game. They were invited to the center court for the whole stadium to clap for them. And it is just such a wonderful story to be able to tell. And the reason that I'm able to tell it is because of the diligence that this company puts on safety and training and reliability, not only on ourselves, but on each other. And so this is not the only rescue that we have performed in the Charles River. It's just the most recent one and the most publicized one. So it's a really nice thing to be able to be proud of a company that you work for. So this is picturesque example of the view that Andy Wilson had in mind when he tried all these things to make a duck tour happen. And Andy, sadly, is no longer with us. Andy passed away some years ago. And he passed the torch and the company to a team of people, and our CEO currently is named Cindy Brown. She's been the CEO for a long, long time. And the city owes a debt of gratitude to Andy Wilson for his vision, right? But as a company and as a city, we also owe a debt of gratitude to CEO Cindy Brown, whose leadership includes emphasis on philanthropy. The Charles River Cleanup Boat, one example. We have this thing called quack-quack give back at Duck Tours. When you buy your ticket, there's a little box you can check, or you can do it in person at the ticket booth. They say, "Would you like to add $1 for quack-quack give back?" What we do is we fund clean water, veterans, and education. And so if you donate, great. At the end of the year, Boston Duck Tours matches every single dollar. It's an equal match. So if you give $1, Duck Tours gives $2, and so on and so on. We've raised well over $1 million in recent years for local charities. One of them, Charles River Cleanup Boat. Now this is Hot Wheels. You saw him a while ago in his conductor outfit with a propeller hat and his toy car. This guy, he portrays the New World's first personal injury lawyer, Credence Commonwealth. And he gets on the duck and he goes, "Have you been hurt by land? Have you been hurt by sea?" Anyway, Charles River Cleanup Boat was the idea years ago of a guy named Tom McNichol. He had a little boat and he wanted to clean up the Charles with a net, a pool skimmer, and he couldn't afford a motor. So we went to Boston Duck Tours and he said, "Hey, you guys seem like you're doing okay. Would you mind buying me a motor for my boat so I can clean the river?" And they said, "Of course we will. My God, thank you for doing this." So they buy him his motor, and the Charles River Cleanup Boat is going up and down, and we send volunteers to clean up all the time. Back then and even today, there's a whole sign-up sheet. Most of it is Duck Tours employees and Museum of Science employees out there with nets cleaning up the litter. And these two found a blue bike in the river. That's why they're so excited about it. So Tom McNichol passed away, and it wasn't sudden, and that's morbid, but the reason I bring that up is he knew that he had to get his affairs in order, and this was one of the things of which he was most proud. And so when he knew that he needed to pass it to somebody, he went to CEO Cindy Brown and he said, "Look, would you be willing to take this company under your wing?" No pun intended. And she said yes. And so Boston Duck Tours is a for-profit company, of course, but we have now legally and physically, we put effort into this nonprofit aspect of the business in order to clean up the river. In a larger context, Charles River Watershed Association. They protect, restore, and enhance the Charles River and the watershed through science, advocacy, and the law. The first Corps of Cadets. This is you've seen this. This most recently was like a Smith & Wollensky Steakhouse or something like that. That, I think, has closed and the building is empty. But this building was built as an armory in the 1800s for the first Corps of Cadets, which dates all the way back to 1729. They were formed as a company of soldiers to accompany the royal governor when he arrived in Boston, and they have never disbanded since. They've been involved in every U.S. campaign from then to present day, and they don't occupy the castle anymore. They have a like an armory and museum in the Back Bay, and you know, once a year we go there with squeegees and Windex and we polish all the cases, and we do a lot of funding for them as well. Needs provide service dogs for various applications, including deafness and or hearing loss, service dogs for veterans, adults with disabilities, children with disabilities, children with autism. You can see Kilroy the duck presenting a big check, this cute little good boy dog over here. And one day, recently, they had a duck tour just for all these dogs. And so the duck was filled with dogs. The Revolutionary Spaces. You might have heard of this. It's a nonprofit. It used to be called the Bostonian Society. They took ownership and stewardship over the Old State House and Old South Meeting House. That's what the Bostonian Society had done. And now Revolutionary Spaces is the new name of the company. They do education programs, tourism, and I will say, I love tour guiding. I love being a tour guide and a guest on them. Two of the very best walking tours I've ever taken were run by the people at Revolutionary Spaces. They were two different tour guides, two different tours of the same exact sites in the same exact area. They are really, really excellent. Also, Run to Home Base. Run to Home Base supports veterans who are returning home and suffering from wounds that you cannot see. And we don't need to get heavy about it, but more and more we are understanding the mental aspects of what it takes to go into military service and what that can do to you physically and psychologically. And so Home Base is leading the charge to help make a better homecoming for these people. And the event, of course, Run to Home Base is you start and end at Fenway Park. Here is yours truly wearing number 34, David Ortiz's number. So I figured if I'm crossing that plate, I got to do it like Big Papi. So we've become synonymous with the sports scene in Boston too, because of Cue the Duck Boats. Back in the 90s, the first time the Patriots won the Super Bowl in the recent run with Tom Brady and all of that, they put out bids to the whole city. Who can make a parade happen? They went to the bus company, they went to the trolley company. What will it cost us? What will it cost us? Bottom line. The Super Bowl, the Patriots organization doesn't have a lot of money, so I understand that they're nickel and diming. But anyway, they all go out for bids, and Duck Tours has the presence of mind to say, we'll do it for free. Well, that was the number that I think Bob Kraft was looking for. So he said, you got the job. Well, what this created was a legacy of celebration in the city. And so subsequently, every championship, when the clock is ticking down at the end of a win, the announcer joyfully says, cue the duck boats, or get the duck boats ready. And look, just look. I mean, and the best part about this, I've got so many photos in my computer, I can't even remember which one this was, because we've won so many and we've driven in so many of them. So ticker tape parades, the crowd comes out. Now, one of them that was very special to me was 2013. So the Red Sox win in 2013. And that was the year that they all had beards, and so people in the stands were wearing beards. Well, this was my duck that day, and I had a bobblehead, and I made that bobblehead a beard, and I made myself a beard because I can't grow a good enough playoff beard, that's for sure. I'm not going to win anything. And we got to go into Fenway Park. So the center field door is just out of frame here. Our ducks extended from that door all the way across the monster, through the warning track, the base paths, and around again. We barely fit in there. We were all like nose to nose, and one vehicle here is a flatbed truck. That was for the Dropkick Murphys, the band. And that's relevant, I'll tell you in a minute, but I want to show you some more of these. There's Red Sox Nathan, there at Fenway Park. There I am with hair, my whole life ahead of me. So the parade begins, right? And they're like, okay, get ready, start moving, the crowd is going. And all of a sudden, the Dropkick Murphys truck gets stuck in the mud. And all the ducks prior are out on the street and people are cheering, but now there's a big hole in the parade and because the Dropkicks are stuck. And so the guy in front of them in a duck had the presence of mind to use the tow rope that we use in the river. And he gets the shackle and he hooks it to the truck and he puts it in all-wheel drive and low gear, and he pulls the Dropkick Murphys out of the turf. But the groundskeeper at Fenway said that we are never invited back. Can you imagine? You know how pristine that field is. Look at what we did to that thing. Anyway, so we had hours to kill. The security, they had to do all the security checks and stuff inside the park of all the ducks. So we were running around the field for hours. There I am calling to the bullpen. This is what I used to wear. My costume was Plucky Ruffles, the cruise ship comedian. And so this is what I wore to work every day. Here I am with my foam beard standing in front of the green monster. We were playing wiffle ball. There's my bobblehead again. There's me posing inside of a beard. All the ducks had beards made of shag rug. And we had to cut them off before we got into the river because the Coast Guard was not thrilled about that. This is the team, though. So again, you see the players waving, during the parades. Look at all the people that have to staff these ducks. And Duck Tours, by the way, still does not charge any of these teams for these parades. It's definitely worthwhile, but every single employee here is on the clock for hours and hours and hours, and you've got the conductors, you've got the drivers, you've got a whole team of mechanics, and behind them, of course, is the score of the final game when we won the World Series. So I want to tell you one crazy thing. So we're running around, and there's always a moment before the thing begins of like, all right, playtime is over. Get serious. Everybody look professional because the players are coming and don't embarrass me. And so they go, okay, the Red Sox are coming. Everybody get on. So I run up to my duck and I'm sitting there and I'm taking off my beard because I look stupid and okay. And all of the office staff and family are sitting in the seats and they're on every duck for the parades. We build these wooden platforms so the players can wave and be seen out the roof. So the players come onto the duck and I've got the pitchers, Uehara, a couple of other middle relief guys, and this pitcher named Andrew Bailey. He was like a sixth inning guy. He was a great force in the World Series. And I'm sitting there, and all I can see of them is the bottom of their jerseys, and then their jeans and their shoes, and that's all I could see. And I am obligated, safety-wise, to give them a safety speech, which feels so stupid. Nobody wants to hear this, but I get on the microphone and I go. Congratulations to the Red Sox. I'm your captain today. I have to give you a safety speech. My name is Plucky Ruffles. And all of a sudden, one of the uniforms goes, whoop, and he comes down, he's looking under the duck roof. He goes, "You're Plucky Ruffles?" And I went, "Yeah." He goes, "My name's Andrew Bailey." He goes, my relatives just took your duck tour yesterday. They can't stop telling me how great it was. Can I get a picture with you?" And so and I go, "Okay." So Andrew Bailey climbs all the way up the duck, and there we are. At the behest of Andrew Bailey, he got a photo with celebrity Plucky Ruffles, and the parade was on. So we've got Uehara, Tazawa, Bailey. There I am with my stupid foam beard again. I was feeling more courageous. During the parade, of course, that year, 2013, all of a sudden, the ticker tape stops, and the music stops, and the parade stops, and we don't know why. And it's because Johnny Gomes told his duck to stop, and he lowered the ladder, and he gets down with the World Series trophy, and he places it on the finish line of the Boston Marathon. And then his friend Jared Saltalamacchia comes out, and together these guys place on there the Boston Strong 617 Red Sox jerseys that those two guys had designed them for this event. They wanted to do it. They wanted to make it special. There was silence, and suddenly they start singing "God Bless America." The whole back bay is in tears. They're giving the jerseys to the people, the stores that were hardest hit in those terrible events. And everybody finally like dries their tears. The ladder goes back up, the music comes back on, and the parade goes on. Jake Peavy, the pitcher, this was the duck he was riding on, one of the originals, Charlie River. He bought it and brought it back to Alabama, where he had it painted as a tribute to himself in the World Series, the score, and the city of Boston as a whole. And that actually is from Twitter, and the text of that is, "Boston, this is my tribute to you." So we can speed through these, this is just me driving in the Patriots parade. I made myself a duct tape tuxedo. Bob Kraft did not want to take that picture with me, which I find hysterical. Tom Brady wanted no part of me, but I wanted a selfie. I'm wearing a ring. There's the city, the Berkeley building, with a duck down in the background. Looks totally cool. Now, one of the funniest things, Gronkowski, he's hanging out the side of the duck, he's hanging off the thing, wiggling his bum around, he's on the hood shirtless, and we have such a safety culture at Duck Tours that they always say, keep them off the hood, drive safely, no antics. And so during this parade, the radio signals, the guy driving the duck sees that our big boss is calling. And he goes, hello, the boss's name is Phil. And he goes, hello, Phil. He goes, hey, you gotta get Gronkowski off the roof and you gotta get Gronkowski off the hood. This is dangerous. And there's a beat. And the driver goes, Phil, the Seattle Seahawks couldn't stop this guy. What am I supposed to do? And Phil goes, okay, drive carefully. And so Gronk was a very funny part of many, many parades, and I think he started to feel sorry for what he had put us through. So Gronkowski just recently opened the Gronk Playground right on the Esplanade. You can see the DCR signage. This is right where the ducks come out of that little stone hallway, and in the playground they have little miniature duck boats that kids can ride around on. This one's Foxborough Ferry. The rest of them have Patriots kind of names too. Here's some more just random pictures of the mayhem. It's so much fun. There's one story, these speak for themselves, but this in particular is funny. I remember this was from the 2013 parade too, because I took that photo of those boats. That's the Charles River Yacht Club. And the duck in front of me was David Ortiz, and he's up on his thing waving, and people are throwing him beers, and he'll catch a beer and he drinks it, and then somebody throws him another one and he opens it and he drinks it, and then he catches one and it's a Guinness and he throws it back. And I love Guinness, and I'm watching this whole thing and I go, oh, I would have had that. Anyway, such a fun time. Look at the mayhem. This is the Boylston Street bus stop. So these kids are like 9 feet in the air, shirtless, and this is the dignified Boston Public Library reading room. And here's this one enterprising Bruins fan who goes up as if he's going to check out a book, and then watches the entire parade from there. This is King's Chapel Church without a parade. This is the same graveyard. This is the graveyard, oldest graveyard in the city. All those people in it. Now, getting back to the tour. One of the most beloved traditions, of course, is driving the duck. This is a sticker that we give to kids who drive the duck. And it's a little bit of a juggling act for the narrator because we have all different expectations. You have people on there who didn't bring their kids or don't care about kids driving. They're over that, right? But then you have parents who this is the only thing they've ever wanted to do is have the kid drive the duck. And so as a narrator, you have to give the history, and also you're running this whole operation of who else wants to drive. On our right, you can see the State House, Gold Dome, fact, fact, fact. Good job, little Jimmy. All right, who's ready? Sticker, 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 sticker. Well, this was years ago. This is my little kid, who is now 11 years old. And he doesn't look like this anymore. But this was a tour where I got to have him on the duck, driving the duck. And we were out in the middle of nowhere, so I took a selfie of it. And it's just such a wonderful memory to have, in a frame, in our minds. And you can see, my buddy was painting the inside of our house, and he saw the photos everywhere. And he said that he started getting weepy because of the look in my kid's eyes, looking at his larger-than-life, silly clown daddy who can drive a World War II tank through the streets of Boston. So, like I said, to close, like I said, it's been 15 years that I've been at this company, which was a real surprise. And it is challenging in a logistics way, but lately it's been challenging in a social way. And what I'm getting at is, I don't need to tell any of you what the news cycle is. Today, yesterday, tomorrow, it is getting more and more negative all the time. You can't get away from the news. And to go through a city where so many heroic things happened, so many fundamentally forming events that created the country that we are in, it can be very disheartening to be driving around thinking that all of that is in peril, you know? With that said, we can't be lecturing people who have paid for tickets. We entertain people from all over the world, all over this country, people who don't necessarily think like, you know, a blue Massachusetts. And so we have to find a way to ride the line between educating people about what happened here and how and why, and how it went well, and how it went poorly, and what happened next. And as a company, we give money to the causes that mean something to us: clean air, clean water, education, treating veterans the right way. And so, even though we dress up as clowns, and it's all supposed to be a lighthearted affair, our responsibility actually has the ability to lighten things up. Because all people really want, no matter what they come into the tour believing or what their agenda is or which station they watch, they've paid for a ticket to have a half an hour and a half with their family, to have some laughs, to have a good time, and to see one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And so now that I am training and hiring people, I take very seriously the responsibility of being dignified with the history, factual, and letting the tour and the city open up to everybody who chooses to go on. And so, if you've never been on a duck tour, I hope you will consider doing it. If you have been on a duck tour, now you know a little bit about what it takes to make it look effortless and silly and fun. And so, here is a wonderful picture of Andy Wilson, and I think we can say thank you to him. And in closing, I'm going to say one last quack quack. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Here's Kilroy. Quack, quack. Thank you. So, if you have questions, I'll answer them. If you've had enough, I'll stop talking. Yes, ma'am.
You operate all year round?
We operate pretty much 9 months of the year. Right around St. Patrick's Day, we begin tours for the spring, and then we end every year the weekend after Thanksgiving. Sir?
What's the operating budget for those 28?
It's a good question. You know, I knew I was going to get this, and I don't. The truth is, I don't know. It's a lot. It is. Although a quick Google search, I think, is pretty accurate, but we're talking in the millions of dollars that we spend and make all the time. So when you're, you know, rolling around underneath a duck in the morning, you don't think, I work for a multi-million-dollar company. But when you start doing the math of, okay, X dollars per ticket, 35 tickets per duck, 3 ducks per half hour from 3 different locations, you know, my friend was pointing out that annually we carry more people than the Patriots have fans at Gillette, than the Bruins have fans at the Garden, every game combined. Same with the Celtics, because those are, you know, it's an 18-ish thousand seat stadium. The only sports entity that outperforms us is the Red Sox, because Fenway is, 35, 36,000, and for a long, long time they were selling out every single game, and these days they're starting to do it again because they look good. But it's quite a lot of money that flies around, which makes it nice to know that there is a philanthropic end of it too, because, you know, it would be very easy for them to not do that, but I know I speak for the company when I say that we feel grateful to be in Boston, and so we try to show that every way we can. Sir?
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. One more in the back?
In your early days,
Yeah.
as you reflect, what stands out for you that got you really hooked on this?
I can tell you the exact fact that made me go, what? And want to keep reading. And it wasn't even when I worked for Duck Tours. I was like 30 years old, and I had grown up around here, but had been living elsewhere for a long time. And my fiance at the time, who is now my wife, said, what do you want to do for your birthday? And I said, I think I want to do a duck tour. And she went, what? And so she said, okay, that's kind of hokey, isn't it? I said, I don't know, they look like they're having such fun. I want to go quack at them. And as we were turning from where Cheers is onto Arlington Street, the narrator said, and of course this used to all be water, the Back Bay neighborhood. And I went, what? Because even though I grew up in Concord, which I should know some history. Nope, didn't care, didn't want to know it. Boring, doesn't matter. And when he said, well, all of this used to be water, and then he held up a picture that now, when we train people, we give them that photo and we say, you show this on every tour, because nobody's going to even believe it. And he explained what the Back Bay used to be, what it is now, how all the landfill in Boston created what it created. And that was like the gateway fact for me going, I can't believe I'm this old and never even thought, why is it called Back Bay? And once that happened, and then, eventually years go by and I end up getting this job and they hand me this history tome like this, that now I'm in charge of editing and updating the history book, but it created an appetite in me that I went, this city, the more you learn, the more there is to learn, and there's never enough knowledge, and isn't this wonderful? Sir?
Are those ducks original from World War II, or are they?
Not anymore. The 28 that we have now, these are purpose-built for tourism. The old ones still exist. We have a few that we have as a museum piece here and there, but they became too costly and to maintain. And given that safety is such a priority and environmental issues too, all these new ducks, they're bigger, they're wider, they're longer, they're safer, and they run on biodiesel. And so their carbon footprint is lower than a four-stroke engine running on normal gas all day. But the dollars and cents aspect of it was cheaper to buy new ones from a manufacturer who popped up than to maintain the old ones anymore. So, yes?
Does the person in costume, like you,
Yeah.
who does the talk, are they also able to drive the boat
Some.
if they had to?
So yes, as a deckhand in the water, they know enough to get the thing to shallow ground or to operate it safely in the water. On the land, they don't. Well, there are three classifications of jobs. One, or maybe four. You can be a commercial driver only. You can be a narrator only. Between the two of you, somebody has to have a captain's license. So back in the old days when Duck Tour started, it was a one-person operation. The driver was the captain, was the narrator. And so you needed all of those credentials in one person. Now, they have wisely split that job so that the driver stays focused on the road only, the narrator is entertaining the guests, and between the two of them, there's a captain's license. So what they call the legacy conductors, the people with all the credentials, they can still narrate, and they could be riding around being driven by someone who's been there for a month and they only know the road, and that's all they need to know. So in order to make, if you see a vehicle rolling down the river, down the road, it means that all of those credentials are present. What configuration it happens in is always a little bit different, depends on who calls in sick and who started where, and I didn't want to work at the museum, I wanted to work at the Pru. There's all this nitty-gritty stuff, but every duck you see has a full complement of commercial driver, captain, narrator, EMT, not EMT, that's an overstatement, but first aid, CPR, so.
Do you have defibs on these?
Not yet, but we're talking about it. Yeah, we don't have it yet, but that's been in the conversation. We're also talking about a fully electric duck. The technology so far isn't there, but it's not for lack of trying. Our head garage mechanic is one of the owners of the company, and he is putting a lot of effort into seeing if we can make that happen. But the defibrillator thing, Similar to the way we know the shallow spots in the river, we also have relationships at hotels, restaurants around the town. I mean, and if push came to shove, we'd run in anywhere if it helped. But given how small Boston is and how much access we have to communication, not only internally, but also we've got the marine radio that can call the Coast Guard, the state police. Even if we're on land, we can broadcast. So I think getting, help to a duck is minutes away, no matter what. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was really fun.